Welcome to the Actually You Can podcast. I'm Miff Galloway, a performance coach passionate about supporting ambitious and high-performing women just like you who know they have untapped potential just waiting to be unleashed. If you're looking to massively up-level your performance in all areas of life, you've come to the right place. My goal on this podcast is to take you beneath the surface so you can connect with yourself on a deeper level while providing you with valuable insights and the tools necessary to navigate life's challenges and go after your goals with strength, clarity, and wisdom. If you're ready to uncover the truth which lies underneath so you can recognize your powerful feminine leadership style, pursue your goals unapologetically, and thrive in every aspect of your life, hit the follow button and get ready to explore the incredible possibilities that lie within you. Together, we'll uncover your next steps in achieving peak performance, because actually, you can. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Actually You Can. Today, we're diving deep into self-worth, transformation, and building relationships that truly support you. My guest is the incredible Tzara Attwater, a relationship development coach who helps successful men and women break free from unfulfilling patterns and step into confidence and connection. From leaving a decade-long relationship to traveling solo across Australia, her journey is a testament to resilience, self-leadership, and the power of choosing yourself first. So let's dive straight into it. Welcome to the show, Zara. It's wonderful to have you here.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, Miff. I've heard so much about you, so I'm super excited to be here. It's one of those great gifts to be able to share your heartbeats with someone.
Share your heartbeats. I love that. And so you mentioned, to kick us off, you mentioned that you support people to step into confidence. And we often say people wish to build confidence. And so I'd love to ask, why is confidence something that we need to build? Like, are we born without it and we need to build it? Or is it something that we lose and therefore need to rebuild? What's your take on building confidence?
Right. Well, it's a great question. And I love that we start with this because there really needs to be some clarification around self-esteem and self-confidence. So I'm just going to throw it out there, Miff. Do you know what the difference would be between self-confidence and self-esteem?
I'm going to have a stab because I liken self-confidence as confidence is related to competence. So I know for me, the more competent I am at something, the more confident I become. I don't know how that necessarily links to self-esteem. I'd love to learn more. And if that's your definition of confidence as well.
That's great. I love that. I love that sharing. That's a great way to start because your self-confidence, it's something that should fluctuate based on your skills and your competence, which is exactly what you said. So it's tied to your abilities, and that's normal. If your confidence goes up and down, that's fine because you're actually developing it through practice. But self-worth, your self-esteem, it should remain constant. It shouldn't ebb and flow. And the problem arises, and I see this all the time in my clients, is when we confuse the two, when we blend our sense of value as a person with what we can do. So it creates this kind of value trap, right? Where your self-esteem rides these highs and lows of your performance that's just not sustainable or healthy. Now, before we started here, you were sharing with me that you've got a newborn child. And so I'm just going to invite the audience or the listeners to kind of consider what about a child and just to think about a small baby. When a baby is born, they can't do anything, right? They've got no achievements, they've got no skills, they've got no possessions, right? And so by the standard that we often hold ourselves, the measure that we keep ourselves to, that baby would be considered useless, right? But we instinctively know that their worth is absolute. They don't even have to earn our love or value. It's just a given, right? You wouldn't abandon them at the hospital for lack of achievement, right? their value is really inherent, and that is just as yours is. So when you tie your worth to what you do, you're setting yourself up for a double bind. So if you succeed, you're going to feel really valuable. But if you fail, your self-esteem crashes. And this is what I mean when I say it pegs your worth to these external outcomes and it makes it super fragile. But your value as a human being is fixed. You've already won the human lottery. There is nothing to prove. But confidence is tied to your skills and capabilities. So it should rise and falls with your competence. I always say to people, if you're a doctor or a brain surgeon and you're about to, do some surgery on my brain, your confidence should reflect your abilities, not inflated, not diminished, just aligned, right? I wouldn't want someone who was super confident but had no skills. Does that answer
Yeah,
the
I
question?
love that analogy. And most, first of all, thank you for making the distinction between self-esteem and self-confidence. I like almost the permission to allow your confidence to waver, to fluctuate, to go up and down. I think even just that realization and having that as fact will be a great support to some people. And I'm keen to use the example of a newborn baby. And I think that's just a beautiful example. I'm assuming that a newborn baby just thinks they're worthy. How do we get it all wrong? How do we start going, no, my self-worth is tied to my achievements and my self-confidence? What happens?
Great question. And I think it starts off in school, right? Where we learn to we've got to get the A plus, we've got to get the B, we've got to get the A plus. If we get a C, children can sometimes learn what they're associating with love from their caregivers, from their parents. And so when they're at school and they get an A plus and they come home, it might be like ice creams, high fives, lots of love, and they learn to understand that that's something that they need to do. When they come back with a C or a C minus or something, maybe mum and dad aren't as loving, and so they learn to associate. Okay, when I do this thing, I'm loved. I value myself. When I don't achieve, I'm not able to get the love that I want. And I think that's where it really stems from. And so we learn to associate our worth and value in the things that we do. And so it's setting ourselves up, like I said, for an absolute double bind. Our value crashes and peaks. And it's intrinsic. We were all babies at one point, and we were all that precious, valuable. It was so valuable. That little baby that's just, you wouldn't abandon them at the hospital just because they didn't have the same measure of achievement that you measure yourself by. So, I just thought that would, kind of bring it in.
Yeah.
Your own.
Yeah. And to be fair, that hit home for me. So thank you. Well done. And you mentioned that it's something that likely stems in school. And then I guess if we're exposed to it, we just continue to look for it and get more and more evidence as we get older. What in your experience with the people that you work with, what are some limiting beliefs you see people who struggle with confidence? What are they saying to themselves, and then what are those thoughts manifesting as in their day to day?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I think most of your listeners might be familiar with the term imposter syndrome, right? Because this is where it really shows up. It becomes a thinking bias for people to discount their abilities, not think that they're good enough, an inability to accept compliments because of this early childhood development that we've had in school. It's all competitive based, trying to get the best results, which has a beautiful kind of motivation as children, but we don't as adults think to go back and question it. And so what I try and bring awareness to are some 4 key points. If you're open to me sharing about
Yeah, I would
the
love it.
points, so they're basically thinking biases, right? And so what I mean by that is how we unconsciously apply these conditions or thinking biases when certain conditions are being met. It's like running a program in your mind, right? Let's say you're at work and you imagine seeing someone doing something that you think's absolutely amazing, but without realizing it, it's like you immediately put these glasses on. It's this comparison filter. Now, every thought and behavior is being processed through that lens of comparison. And that's what I mean by these thinking biases. And if they're showing up in one area, guaranteed they're going to be showing up in other areas of your life. And they're going to influence you in so many different ways wherever you're going to be feeling impacted by that. So the four key main biases here, and is the first one that's absolutely necessary for imposter syndrome to exist, is this self to other comparison, this idea of judging yourself in relation to another person. And it's about comparing your abilities and capacities to them, right? So what I often say is, the question becomes, why do we do that? Why do we compare ourselves to someone else, right? And then there's that great quote. I don't know whether it was Oscar Wilde or someone that said that, but just be yourself because everybody else is taken, right? So that first one that comes up, this thinking bias, is about comparison to other. And so then once that's triggered, it's like this filtering system. We compare ourselves, and then the next thing that gets triggered is discounting your own abilities, discounting that you have the capabilities to do it. Even when you have clear evidence that you are competent, you're going to push that into the background and dismiss it entirely. I had this experience where I was training for a particular qualification, and I had spent 6 months doing training every other day to get qualified, and I had to go through, a feedback adjudication process, and I got mentored on it, and I finally passed the exam, and completely didn't believe it. Completely was like, no, you don't. You mean someone else. Like, you've got my name mixed up. And I made the adjudicator take me through how I had what I had actually passed on, because I just didn't believe it. I was discounting my own abilities. So yeah. So is that landing for you? Can you connect with that?
Most definitely, yes. And the comparison, how it all starts with comparison to others, I think that's a really great thing to be aware of, because even the first two, I do that, but I hadn't actually considered that it all starts with comparing to others and then it flows from there.
Yeah. 100%. So imposter syndrome won't exist without that first cognitive bias taking place, right? I'm trying to get the anyway. So first off is comparison to others. Then you then start discounting your own abilities in the face of that person. It's like this comparison. Oh, they're doing it so much better. I'd never do it that much. I could never do it that well, right? Even if you know in your heart of hearts you're going to be able to do that. So then the third one is what we just started this conversation with, about conditional self-esteem. So when you've got the comparison to others and then the discounting your ability, you're then linking your value as a human being to your ability to achieve something, ability to be confident in something, right? And so that then attributes your worth to your ability to do something, and that sends you on the trajectory to the fourth thinking pattern, which is that we're motivated by what we're trying to avoid. So what I mean by that, it's actually called a negation. Am I getting this right? A negation motivation system. So what do I mean by that? If you're working on the 28th floor of a high-rise building, you're likely going to take the lift in there, not necessarily because you want to be trapped in a kind of very enclosed space with a lot of people, but because you want to avoid walking up the stairs. And so this is the motivation away from what I don't want. And so really this is absolutely massive, really, because if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, it's very lightly tied to how you're motivating yourself. It's really not the healthiest way to be doing it. And so those are the four key big steps to really, embrace the imposter syndrome. If you're running those patterns, then it's likely that you'll be running imposter syndrome, and it will not only be showing up at work, but in other areas of your life, wherever you're going to feel that trigger.
I love those 4 highlights, and there is so much I want to dive into in here. But first of all, you mentioned that imposter syndrome impacts our ability to accept compliments. And I worked for organizations before where one of their values, like it's an organizational value that they promote and people get assessed against, is humility. And I feel like in this particular environment, there is confusion between humility and someone's ability or lack of ability to receive a compliment. What would you say is the relationship between those two?
Yeah, right. And so this, I think it goes back to this competence, right? And so we have this, I think is it called the told poppy
Yeah.
syndrome here in Australia, where we're not given permission to accept a compliment, and somehow it's negated. I know I think it's in Japan or something, they talk about the seed that should be punched down or knocked down, or there is this kind of, it's an enculturation about how we perceive ourselves, that we somehow can't excel, we can't be seen as being better than. Um, and so we have what I think is this false humility. It's like, oh no, it's not real. But potentially inside we kind of glad that we're getting that compliment, although we want to be seen to be not accepting it. I think there's difference between the humility there and what was the other word you said? Humility and
The inability to receive a compliment. Yeah.
yes, yeah. I think there is a little bit of an enculturation around that thinking.
And so
Yeah.
do you think there is a place for, I mean, humility, there's always a place for, I guess, healthy humility, but do you think there's a place
Yeah.
for, yeah, should we be really recognizing someone's ability to be humble, or should we be pulling out something else? What would be more constructive in, I guess, in a corporate setting?
Yeah, right. It's a great question because I think it's based on our
Yeah.
motivation. It's our motivation strategy, right? So how much can you give yourself permission to accept a
Mm.
compliment? And if you're finding that the pattern is consistently no, 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 then you're going to be discounting your own abilities, which is going to lead to imposter syndrome. You're not going to be able to recognize your value in anything because it's going to be linked to what you're doing. And so I think there is a real opportunity to step in if there is a consistent behavior to not accepting compliments. Just ask yourself what that's on
Yeah.
behalf of, because I think there is a great deal of merit to recognize and give yourself a breather for the achievements that you've achieved. Otherwise, you're going to be on this hamster wheel and constantly thinking, oh, I just need to do this one thing and then I'll get the recognition. And then you'll get there and it'll be, I just need this other thing. And that ultimately takes most leaders into
Oh,
burnout, which is an incredibly unhealthy state to be in. And so, yeah, step back, take a breathe in, and recognize the compliment. And it also is going to you're going to be able to recognize within yourself your own competencies of where you've
I
come.
like the reflection of being able to accept a compliment as the ability to reflect on your competencies. It's not like just they're saying something nice for the sake of saying nice. It's like, hang on, what does this say about how competent I am or something? I hadn't actually considered that lens before, so thank you for that. And you mentioned
Yeah.
as well around negative motivation system. I hope I got that right. But I mean, I work in the fitness industry, and so I get a lot of people who come to the gym because they want to lose weight. They go, I'm fat, I'm unhappy, I'm unfit. And so a lot of people are driven by something negative. And I'm under the belief that if you want sustainable transformation, or I guess sustainable habits long term, then it needs to, I mean, pain could get the fire started, but what's going to keep it burning is something positive. What's your experience in the work that you do with that? Do you find similar?
Yeah, so I think what you're talking to is what I was mentioning before, the motivation away from and the motivation towards something. So if you have an outcome and you can see that the positive intention of your outcome and an outcome goal, let's say it's
Mm.
losing weight, you rather motivated towards that goal of losing weight is going to be a far healthier mindset than I'm running away from this fat monster that's coming to get me, right? I want to lose the weight rather than I want to gain health. So it's in the language that we use, but it's surprisingly common, and I think it relates back to how we were taught at school to be able to improve. It's based on that achievement and linking our worth back to what we do as a merit. And so there's this, yeah, it's a negation motivation system that half of us operate in that way, and it'll show up as, mentally beating yourself up and judging yourself really harshly, in the hope that that's going to push you to be better, to grow, to succeed. But it's like, I often tell my clients, it's like you're locking yourself in a lift, in a room the size of a lift, with this massive bully that is constantly telling you you're not good enough. What are you going to talk to him for? What did you say that in that meeting for? That was ridiculous. Who are you to think that you? If you and if you're in that room for long enough, you're going to believe everything that tells you. And so, it's just a little reminder for your listeners, if that's what you're experiencing, there's an open door button on that lift, and you can walk away. You don't have to listen to that bully all the time. It may, swipe with pride whatever you can that's actually helping you. But if that's the only voice you're listening to, you're not flexing the other muscle of listening to all the compliments and the things that you can do well. That side of things will have atrophied, and you'll know, as the gym instructor, that we need to have balance, and we need to have the ability to flex both. Otherwise, it's just going to rob us of our self-worth and our self.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing in that too is, like you mentioned, it's like being trapped in a lift with your thoughts, and they're all negative. I think a first step is acknowledging that your thoughts aren't necessarily truth. Like, you don't have to believe them, right? And so
No,
I'm
yeah.
interested to hear, with the work that you do, I mean, people who have imposter syndrome, from my experience, often overcompensate by like working harder, people pleasing, self-sabotaging, all that sort of stuff. I'm sure everyone's like, yes, I do that. How do you help clients break out of those cycles?
Well, it's obviously going to be context dependent on whatever they're experiencing, but it's often, if we look at the anxiety that we build up, the idea that I want to people please because and it's a good example, my fear of not being liked is what I'm moving away from. I want people to like me, but I'm motivated by this fear that I'm going to be disliked.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That's moving away from what I don't want. You're not actually wanting people, you're not actually doing the things for people because you like them, but because of a fear that you don't. So what I say, can you give yourself permission to not be liked? And this really, yeah, it's
Yeah.
really confronting. Can I give myself permission to not be like? What would that look like if you could? How would that change anything for you? Because that's then bringing awareness to something that's within your control. And once you have that awareness, you're then giving yourself a choice. I can choose to continue in this behavior that's not serving me, or I can make a difference. And so it's about having those honest conversations, holding the mirror up, and saying, and this isn't to sort of go, you've got to be horrible to people. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But it's what's motivating that behavior is likely a frame that you're holding about yourself, which is linked to a fear and insecurity or something. And so, yeah, I always say awareness is curative, because when things are happening outside of our awareness, when they're blind spots, it's like, we're walking in the dark. We don't actually know. But when we can shine a light and bring awareness to what we're actually doing, it allows us the choice. And so with that choice, what are you bringing to your awareness? What are you doing? How are you going to respond in your behaviors?
Yeah. And I love with self-awareness, because and this has definitely happened to me, just even hearing some of the things that you've mentioned in the reframes. I'm like, oh, I hadn't thought of it like that. But when I do think of it like that, this is what I would do differently. And I like saying, like, self-awareness
Right.
is the first step in any sort of real transformation. And I'm interested to hear from your point of view, because you can be aware of something and then still choose not to do something about it, right? And for some people, it's like,
Yeah.
it just can't be bothered, or it's too
Right.
hard, or there's that fear element. And so I often hear people go,
Yeah.
oh, they need to hit, and I'm doing air quotes here because I'm not sure I like this terminology, but they need to hit rock bottom in order to get to the motivation to be able to make a change. What's been your experience, or what do you see happens with if someone has the awareness, but they struggle with taking that first step towards actually changing?
I love this question. I love this question. This is really knocking on the door of what I call, or what is known as, a secondary gain.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean by that?
I'd love for you to explain
A
it to the
secondary
listeners,
gain,
though.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So I just have this beautiful example of a client that came. She had a fear of spiders. It's a little bit off topic, but stick with me. You'll get it. She had this fear of spiders, and I was running her through a pattern to be able to remove the phobia and help her get over this. And she was really very, very scared. It was a genuine need. She really wanted to get over it. And as we went through the process, she didn't the fear didn't go, and so we dug a little bit deeper and found out that she had this secondary gain, which was when she was a little girl and she saw a spider, her father would pick her up and put her on his lap, give her a massive hug and kiss her and say, it's okay, they're there, I've got you. And so she had learned to associate the love, and this is what, we always associate the love with being scared of spiders. So if she got rid of the fear of spiders, it meant, illogically or logically for her, that she might not get love from her father. And so when she realized that, when she got that awareness, she was able to get rid of the fear of the spiders. And so that's what, I mentioned, when we have the awareness, we have a choice. Do I really want to keep being scared of spiders or not? And so often when people are holding on to their imposter syndrome, or, you talk about they need to get really deep down and rock bottom before they change, there is truth in that. There is a lot of truth in that sometimes works for people before they go, I've had enough of this. I'm done. I can't take any more of this. I'm over it. But it can also be because of a secondary gain that is also operating outside of their consciousness. And so it's all about awareness. Awareness is curative. If we can bring awareness to what it is that's actually blocking us or holding us back, it gives us choice. And then with choice, we can respond differently.
I love the example of the spider, because for a lot of people, they go, I just have a fear of spiders, right? Like they don't think too much to it. But the secondary gain, holy cow, when you think about, hang on, there's a reason why I'm not changing. Like you could have a behavior that you deem so bad and horrible, but for some reason you just can't shake it. It's because there is something that's a stronger force holding you there as well. Like, I've had someone give me the gift of helping me to realize some secondary gains I've had in my life. And I'm like, oh, thank you for that. Didn't realize that, when I get sick, I get love. So I get sick all the time. That's great. I don't want to be sick all the time, but yeah.
Yeah, great awareness. I hadn't thought of that. That's true. Or the association with, if I'm sick, I don't have to go to school and get off of school. And so there could be, there's all sorts of them, and they manifest in various different ways for people. And that's why I say to you, it's very difficult to give you an umbrella carte blanche, because everybody's different. It's just to try and recognize there could be a secondary gain if you're not actually developing any further. Same with losing weight, with people going to the gym. There could be. I know I've worked with a few people that have felt that they would lose their friends if they actually lost the weight, right? That they wouldn't, their friends would change, or they'd be not picked on, but ostracized for losing the weight. They wouldn't be able to be inclusive within the friendship anymore. And that does beg questions about, well, what type of friends are they? But there's the secondary gain that's occurring, and that can often keep us trapped in a behavior that's really not serving us. So while there might be a positive intention, I want to keep my friends, but that means that I'm going to stay unhealthy. The positive intention has actually not got a healthy outcome for us all the time.
Yeah, I love that example of like, hang on, if you think you're going to lose your friends, like what type of friends are they? Like maybe anyway, but that's probably a whole another that podcast there. And this example is
sure.
relevant to me because I went to the physio today, and I find that a lot of the time you can go to a physio and go, I'm going to go to the physio and get them to fix whatever ailment that I have. But a lot of the time, people go to the physio and they never do the exercises. They spend all the money on the appointment and then they just never do the homework. And I'm like, I feel like it's because they go, I'm going to tell myself that I'm going to fix this, but I'm not actually going to do the work. And so I'd love to hear what I mean, I hear a lot in the personal development world that you need to do the work. And again, I'm using air quotes. What do you think in regards to confidence and imposter syndrome? What does it mean to do the work? What work do you need to do to build both?
In a nutshell, it's about stepping out of your
Mm.
comfort zone. Okay. While we remain in our comfort zone, we're on, our growth and our development lies on the edge of our comfort zone. And so unless you're willing to embrace that fear, face those emotions, um, that is also a choice, and some people don't want to do that, and that's fine. Maybe there'll come a point when you're ready to do that and have the support to be able to help you through that, but that's what doing the work is all about. And as human beings, we're wired to self-develop. We just are. From babies, from the moment they start to walk. I'll use another baby analogy here, but I often tell people this idea of failure, right? That we're never going to do this. I can't start a business. I'm hopeless at this. Whatever the narration is that you tell yourself, I link it back to, you imagine when you first learned to walk
Mm.
as a toddler. Your baby wouldn't be old enough yet, but when they start to walk, you're putting one foot down and it's on the side, and you're trying to get up with your ankle and you fall over. I mean, I don't know how many times we would have all fallen over when we were learning to walk. Hundreds, thousands. I mean, what would you like to guess? Have a guess. How
Uh,
many times do you think you would have
Thousands
fallen
and
over?
thousands. Like my little girl is learning to crawl, and the amount of times she's face planted at the moment, like I'm probably at 100 already.
Right. So if we had the kind of concept of, I am never going to get this walking thing, I'm going to give up. I'm not going to do this. It's just hopeless. We'd have never walked. But as children, we never have that concept of, I'm not good enough. And so as we get older, we learn that behavior. That's a learned behavior. And so as adults, we have the maturity now to unlearn that and to recognize, you know what? I don't have to listen to that voice anymore. It served a purpose for me when I was at school, or, for me to be feeling safe, parents telling us, don't play with fire, or don't do this, don't do that. We learned that kind of super ego telling us what we should or shouldn't do protected us then. But as adults, we never think to go back and question, maybe I could, do this thing that I'm stopping myself from doing. And so, yeah, that's what I help bring awareness to, the thinking patterns, and how much, let's just check in. Is that needed? That thinking behavior that you've got right now, is that needed for you as an adult right
And
now?
thank you for calling that out too, because I had my own experience with something similar. So I have a hip injury, which is why I went to the physio. And about 3 years
Oh, right.
ago, I told myself I can't use the rowing machine because it hurt. And it did. But I
Right.
used the rowing machine and it hurt. So I just told myself, yeah, it hurts to do that. And about 6 months ago, I said, I'm going to give it a crack. I'm just going to get on the rowing machine and see what happens. It didn't hurt. And I was
Right.
like, oh,
Ah,
interesting. I told myself that I couldn't do this because it hurt.
right.
And then just one day I decided
Yeah.
to challenge that belief, and I proved myself wrong.
Right.
And I'm like, I wonder where else I'm doing this. Where, like, years ago have I told myself a story that I could probably benefit from challenging right now?
It's a great catch. And, to also be mindful, you don't want to push yourself and your body into something that it can't do. But it's a really great catch to just bring awareness, where else might I be doing this behavior? And it's that keeping ourselves in that comfort zone, because it's comfortable. We kind of create excuses for, well, it's okay, my boss treats me like this, or it's okay that I don't have to ask for a pay rise because I'm I don't want to have conflict and I don't want to rock the boat. But internally, we're holding on to something, or we're doing things that we don't really want. So we're not showing up as our authentic selves. And over a long enough period of time, it's going to create issues, either ill health in the body, or stagnation in other areas, because we are wired to self-develop. We just are. It doesn't matter where you are, who you are, what age you are. We are wired to keep learning. We are wired to motivate ourselves to be better.
And this might sound like a slight tangent, but I read on your website that you had a pretty incredible trip around Australia, and that sounded like it was a pretty pivotal moment for you in your life. I would love for you to share a little bit
Yes.
more about that, and specifically how it related to you stepping outside your comfort zone and building that confidence and resilience within yourself.
So I could talk to you about this for ages, but it was really. I have a little shtick. My little shtick is that I have travelled all over the world to visit solar
Oh, wow.
eclipses. Solar eclipses, yeah. So I've gone all over the world. I'm up to my 11th or 10th or 11th, around there. And then so through COVID, when we all got into lockdown and we were told we can't travel anymore. Um, on a whim, I decided, well, when's the next eclipse? I want to find out when it was. And this is in 2020. And the next one was going to be in the western pinnacle of Australia, up in the Ningaloo Reef in April 2023. So I decided that I was going to build a van, get a secondhand van, strip it out, and rebuild it based on YouTube videos. And just get on the open road and head over to Western Australia for the eclipse with no other agenda other than I'll just get there and then see what happens. It definitely challenged me for the simple reason that I want to grow, and so it got me out of my comfort zone and offered me a fresh perspective on how I viewed myself, how I view others. And I think there's so much value in being able to challenge yourself in traveling and just get a different perspective on things. I've swam with the Ningaloo whale sharks. When I actually got up there, they're like 10 meters in length. They're just the most
Wow.
incredible animals. They're just amazing. So, I've had breakfast with wild emus. I'm making coffee in the back of my van and having breakfast, and like this emu has come out from behind the van. I'm in the middle of nowhere. There's no one else around, and I really wasn't sure whether emus are
Yeah.
dangerous or not. And so he's having a little sniff around, and then his mate turns up, and the two of them are kind of giving it all of this and just being really, really inquisitive. And so, I thought, oh, I don't know if this is a good idea, and I ended up shooing them away. But it was a beautiful moment, to have the wildlife that's there, and just very, very humbling. We're not top of the food chain when we go out bush anymore,
And it,
So it was very, very
and it sounds
humbling.
like there's, I guess, with confidence, there's the knowing. I mean, with anything, right? There's the knowing and there's the actually doing and embodying. And what I love about your trip is it sounds like you had really just real world scenarios where you had the opportunity to build resilience and confidence. And I think in our day to day
Mm,
life, I feel like by the time, I mean, if we choose not to pursue growth or we choose to stay comfortable, typically from my experience, I find people by the age of late 20s, you're pretty solid in the way you think. You might have some idea of what your values are. And if without choosing to consciously question that, you could be that same person for the rest of ever. If nothing major happens to you or you choose not to pursue growth, you could be that sort of person. And so what is the sort of work that someone has to do to be able to build confidence? I mean, I'm assuming there's some element of going outside of your comfort zone, like you mentioned. If someone's like, I need to build confident, but I'm kind of comfortable where I am. I kind of like my life, but I could probably do with a little bit more confidence. What do they do?
right. Well, I think it comes back to this choice, right? If you're comfortable in your, if being in that comfort zone is comfortable, then, good luck, stay there. But I think in your heart of hearts, you're going to know that there is discomfort staying in that comfort zone. And so when that discomfort, um, rises or elevates in you, that's going to be the motivation to be able to do something different. And then it's a question of skills, right? So I'm going to try and dabble. For me, it was, I'm going to see if I can
Yeah.
build this van. I've got no other alternative, and just try it. I'm going to make heaps of mistakes. There's only me. I'm not doing it for anybody else. And so that was also a real catalyst for it. If it had been somebody else that I was doing it for, or there was, an expectation of my outcome at the end, then that confidence might have been a bit harder to achieve. The perfectionism, I'm a recovering perfectionist, so kind of that would have kicked in a little bit more. But because it was just me, and I gave myself permission to, it's going to be finished when it's going to be finished. I obviously have a timeline to get to the eclipse, but I was spending a year building, and I knew that would be fine. It would be long enough to be able to get it done. And so to anybody that's grappling with their confidence, just check in with yourself on what your capacities are and if it's really valid, which is going back to the 4 key points we talked about before, that what are you telling yourself that's not true? What are you telling yourself about your capacities and your competencies that isn't true? And just check in, just give something a go. Do the test model. Go and ask your friends, someone that you really care about, what they think your competencies are. And listen, don't discount it. Just sit with it for a while and then see if you can embody it. One of the interesting things is that with imposter syndrome, or just with confidence in general, that competency, if you are competent in something, you usually, I'm going to say this the wrong way around. If I ask you to go and fly to the moon, right, and there's no chance you could ever fly to the moon in an hour, right? There's absolutely no chance. You're not going to feel incompetent about that behavior because there's no chance that you could absolutely do it. It doesn't even come into the Richter, right? But you only feel incompetent about things that you're actually competent about doing, is what I'm trying to explain, right? And so it's a really interesting thing about people with imposter syndrome and about their own level of confidence in something that they can do. It's quite an irony. It's a paradox, in fact.
It is. I find humans fascinating in that sense. And I feel like you've given a really great step just now to be able to take that first step to build confidence. But I'll ask you the question anyway. What's a really actionable step the listeners can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start to build confidence and overcome imposter syndrome? I mean, we talked briefly offline. You have an incredible resource. Maybe it's your opportunity to share that.
Oh, well, I can tell you, but I would say just off the bat, off the top of my head, give yourself permission to fail. Give yourself permission to not be liked, to give yourself permission to fail. And that will stop the judgment. That will stop you from stopping yourself, And so, that brings us nicely into, for all your listeners and for anyone who's interested, I do have an ebook series to help leaders think smart and lead strong, because I really believe that we are all self-leaders, because we lead ourselves every day, right? We lead ourselves in our thoughts, our behaviors, what we say, just to ourselves, but also to other people and how they perceive us. And so, it doesn't matter whether you're a manager, a team leader, or a senior leader, you are ultimately a self-leader. And so I've written this series of books for people to be able to get some exercises on how to stop that inner critic, how to, be decisive, to stop doubting yourself. And I forget the titles of all of them off the top of my head.
You have a lot of resources.
And I'll send that link for you to share with you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Zara. It's been such a pleasure chatting all things confidence and imposter syndrome. I loved some of the reframes that you'd offered, and I've definitely shifted my perception on particularly imposter syndrome. I really loved the 4 sort of I don't know how to say steps to it. I mean, comparison. Yeah, the comparison to others. I think that's where social media plays a huge role. And I know I can definitely audit my relationship with that. So I know that's one of the steps I'm going to start doing. But thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. And thanks to all your listeners. And hopefully I'll be hearing from you soon.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope this was helpful. If you thought of someone while listening to this podcast, I would be so grateful if you could share this episode with them. While you're doing that, please also take a moment to leave a review on the podcast if you haven't yet already. It takes less than a minute and it means so much to me and helps this podcast to reach more people just like you. Thank you so much for that, and I'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, go out and achieve every dream you have, because actually, you can.